exactly.
Well, it's great to meet you, man. Thanks for taking a minute out today.
Sure. Is that New York in the background? Where is that?
Kansas City, Missouri.
There you go.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm a visual artist as well, so I did that some years back. So that's
Just look
the
like a lot of high rises, and so.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
I
yeah,
haven't been to St. Louis in a long time, so or
yeah,
Kansas City. Yeah,
yeah. It's good. It's surprising. It's a surprising arts hub for people that are on the coast. I don't think they realize it till they come here.
yeah,
So,
exactly. I'm sure it's
so
changed a lot since I was a kid.
yeah, it has. It's grown up a lot. I mean, it always helps when you can win a championship or a Super Bowl. It makes things start kind of perking up a little bit. People start coming in.
Right. So do you know Steve Cardenas? He's a good friend of mine. Lives in
Yeah,
my building from Kansas City.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's legendary here.
Yeah, yeah. He's my buddy. He lives upstairs from me, and we've been playing together for a long time.
Yeah, he's amazingly talented for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, cool, man. And speaking of kind of living, before we get into the latest album, I want to know, how did you survive the last 3 years as a musician? How did you get through the pandemic and how has it changed you?
Well, I do multiple things. I have a club that we opened in 2015, and we survived the pandemic basically through a couple of PPP grants through the U.S. government, which I have to say thank you for because they really came through for us, and we paid rent that way and survived. Um, I also have some property that I own and rent, so I have other, income streams. So I was a fortunate person that way.
So the latest album with your quartet is a live album, which has to feel good coming out of all of this because we all starved for it so hard.
Yeah, I mean, it was so difficult to get things to happen. I had a tour and a recording session in Italy all set up for March 2020.
Oh,
And
wow.
we went, and I think by the time we went, I didn't have my band anymore because they were not allowed to. One taught at Princeton, another one taught at another school, and they weren't allowed to go to Europe, you know, within about a week to go. And then I had a European band, and we went and did two gigs, and the Italy thing was out, but we were going to do the rest. And after two nights, we were on our way to the third gig, and Europe started to completely shut down. We got back here, and we had another date lined up, and Omicron hit, and so that got canceled.
Man.
And I just grabbed a moment, back in February of 2022 and just did a live recording and just to get it. And we liked the results so much, we just went forward with it.
So what are you hoping the listener gets from this album?
A couple things. One is that obviously compositionally, I believe a lot in the music that I've been writing and the band, that the way we're playing. We played a lot together. Um, and also a feeling in the club that has been really inspirational for me and for a lot of musicians around New York City who love like an intimate situation. And it's become very popular in the neighborhood. So there's a good vibe and a good crowd there all the time. And we wanted to capture some of that.
So do things feel different? Obviously, as a club owner, you've seen kind of the sea change. Are things a lot different now that the world's woken up and we're getting back at it, or is it kind of getting to where it was before?
Honestly, it feels a little bit like the pandemic and the shutdown was a dream, 3 years back. And it's like, I know it happened. I know it was a big deal, but the re-entry is a while back. And we reopened the club and people started working again. And in the beginning, it seemed like this incredible feeling of playing music and live. And some of the first performances from a lot of the bands, I remember just being incredible, both for the bands and the audience. And but that's gone by now. It seems more like we're back the way things used to be, at least in terms of being able to perform more regularly. Um, we don't have as much of a late night scene in New York City. I'm talking, like after midnight. Maybe it'll come back. I don't know. Friday night is now king. It always used to be Saturday night. Small things.
Yeah,
They make difference if you're a club owner, but in the end, people still like to go out. They love to go out and hear live music, and that's still happening.
yeah,
Some clubs open, some close. There's never enough here in New York City. Maybe there's not enough anywhere.
yeah.
But that is the way it used to be also. So
Yeah, so a lot of things kind of fall back into place. So
yeah.
how did this journey into the jazz begin for you, or music more specifically?
Well, rather amazingly, I was a late starter because I didn't picture myself and think of myself as musical. And I went to a school where I had to take a semester of music, and you had to take a beginning instruments class. And I went down there and tried to play guitar because I grew up listening to rock and roll and the Beatles or whatever, and the Stones and everything. And they said, well, the violin teacher said we'd only have orchestral strings. And I said, well, I guess I'll take violin. And he goes, well, I know you got big hands. Why don't you play bass? He wanted a bass for the orchestra, and he got it. But that really didn't excite me until somebody my age, right there in this small school, happened to be Thomas Chapin, who was an incredible alto saxophonist and flautist, who was turned into, he became the musical director for Lionel Hampton and became one of the first musicians recorded at the Knitting Factory label, and toured all over the world, became very well known. At 15 years old, he was just a guy in the building, and he grabbed me. And before I even knew what keys were and chords were, we were playing and improvising and playing free and playing tunes and playing Stevie Wonder tunes and the whole gamut. And I fell in love with music. And it was a little bit by accident, although I look back at my elementary school grades and like my best subject was music, and I just for some reason didn't think of myself that way.
Yeah. So are you originally from New York?
Outside of Boston, a suburb of Boston, Northwest. Yeah,
Okay, okay. So what was the first live jazz show you saw that blew you away?
probably Ross on Roland Kirk.
Mm.
Thomas Chapin and I used to go into the jazz workshop in Boston, and some of those live shows there were. I had no idea that this was possible, or that whole tradition I had just started to put my toe into. Of course, it had been, the whole jazz tradition through the history of the United States has been there a long time, but I hadn't seen it live. And I was a kid. I was, 15 or 16, and just going into Boston was a big deal. But we were bitten by the bug, and just how professional that group was, and we were blown away.
So what was your career beginnings like? Like, what was it like to get on stage the first time? How did things kind of take off for you?
Well, at that school, there was a jazz band. We did a lot of performances. Locally, and we did a little. The director did a little tour. I remember coming down to New York City and doing a gig somewhere, and that was our first experience with something. And played in the basement with during the summertime, and just got just involved with music in many different groups, and it just grew from there. And by the time it was time to go to school, I did have it in my mind to go to college, because the rest of the my older brothers and sisters went to college, and I ended up going to Oberlin Conservatory,
Yeah.
and but I think after a year or so of thinking that maybe I was going to be a classical musician, I was like, no, I'm not. Doing some gigs locally around Ohio. Um, Looking back on it, I wish I had done a few more before I ended up in New York City. But then it was very, very intense coming to New York, just in terms of the number of options that of gigs and sessions and meeting people. And I don't know if I ever played so much as I did when I was first coming to New York and was, brand new on the scene, and was playing just all the time, practically every night.
So that's interesting you mentioned that. How seminal was that in your development? I mean, that had to have just totally got your chops up to be in that kind of environment, I would think.
Yeah, like immediately, like
Yeah.
if you're have your eyes open at all, you realize that you need to have everything together. And it's, I think, very important in something for new musicians, that get it all together before you come to an important music mecca like New York. It's not the only one, but um, you know you're there. This is it. It's the big time, and it's time to have it all together. So
Absolutely.
very
So
exciting, I thought.
yeah, I would imagine so. Yeah. So you've seen this from different angles, from a business side, from a playing side. After all these years, what do you like the best about being involved with the jazz community and being a musician?
Being on stage, absolutely. I mean, I know the business from being a club owner forwards and backwards now, and uh, it is fascinating to be on that side of it and realizing that I was the musician that walked in and threw my bass cover over here and my girlfriend over there, and it's just like it didn't no concept that this place was trying to do business. And most band members are great, but there is a little bit of a they there's no way that they would know, and maybe they don't have to know exactly how a club operates, but it sure is interesting and just as a life experience. But I would vastly, prefer to play as much as possible. I was playing at my club last night, and there's nothing like performing and being directly involved um, with music as a performer.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. What's the best advice you've ever gotten? Something that has resonated with you after all these years?
Whew, that's a tough one. I think it came to me maybe not because somebody told me to, but I think the main job that anyone has to do is to trust yourself, to believe in yourself, to have faith in yourself. And as long as you have that, you will survive a lot of things. Some things may come easily, some things may not. You may wait for your opportunity a long time. You may not. You may come quickly, and then you hope that you're ready for it if it comes quickly, or that you still have faith in it if it doesn't come quickly. And your job is to believe in yourself and to have faith. And maybe this is much broader than music. Maybe it's about life in general,
Sure.
because some things are going to go well and some are not. The more you go on in life, everyone has issues. Nothing's perfect. No job is perfect. No music job is perfect. But still believe in yourself, believe in life, and as long as you do that, it makes a lot of things easier. But if you give up on yourself, that's hard to overcome.
Yeah. So why do you love jazz?
I would say that I love music first of all. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't think of myself as a jazz musician first and foremost, although obviously almost you know most of my experiences there. I grew up hearing Beethoven in my house. I grew up hearing Yes or Jimi Hendrix or Sly and the Family Stone, and it's all great music to me. And I mean, look at Miles Davis's career. Look at how many different styles of things and how many different types of musicians he brought in. I think, you know, the concern is music, great music
Yeah.
or not great music. I'd rather be playing great music, good music. Um, doesn't matter so much what it is. Bach, I still practice Bach to this day. I probably will my whole life.
Yeah.
um, like Pablo Casals did. I'm not Pablo Casals, but I think it's a life learning experience that you never reach the end of. And um, yeah,
So if you could go back in time and see any performance from anybody in the history of music live, who would you love to have seen live?
oh, it's easy. John Coltrane, Miles Davis, Charlie Parker, Thelonious Monk, um, Jimi Hendrix,
Yeah.
you know, Louis Armstrong.
Yeah.
You start going down that road.
Sure.
It's hard to pick because Dexter Gordon, Stan Getz. I mean,
It could go on and on and on.
yeah, Grant Green.
Yeah.
I mean, just
Yeah.
unbelievable players that I would love to go back and see.
So being in the cauldron of jazz where you're at, there was a concern over this pandemic. I did a lot of interviews with a lot of musicians, and there was a
Yeah,
lot of cats that were leaving and going to other cities because they couldn't afford rent. And
yeah.
there was just quite frankly, there was a lot of students that was like, what's the future? What am I going to do? And there was kind of this somewhat of an exodus out of jazz. But it seems as though everything's coming back. It's stronger than ever. What's your bead on the community? How strong is it 2023?
As strong as I've ever seen it. The number of younger cats that are here and then keep coming is as strong as I ever remember. I mean, I remember in the pandemic, just the population in general was all leaving New York City for upstate. If you're going to be closed in your house, why don't you get a rental or buy a place upstate so you can be out in the real world, the real world,
Yeah,
non-urban world, if you're going to be hanging out. But yeah, a lot of people come back, and um, uh, but the strength of and the interest in music, despite all the odds, is as strong as I've ever seen it, and we see it coming through the club, that we own, and the number of people, that are looking for bookings, and the different kinds of the uh, types of jazz. I mean, there's a million types of jazz or other kinds of music, because we don't do just jazz at Bar LunÃ. They're out there, they're enthused, and I had a moment in a session a few months ago in which somebody that I thought of as a younger player was talking about something they were doing, and they were talking about the younger cats, and I'm like, wait a minute, how old are you? And it's a never ending thing. There's always another 5 or 10 years younger crowd that's coming through, and they will keep coming.
yeah.
I'm sure of that, not just because of more jazz education programs out there, but uh, I just think people fall in love with music, and it's meaningful to them, and that will always be true.
Yeah, I agree. So everyone out there, Arthur, has a idea of who they think you are. Family, friends, fans, colleagues, everybody. But you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Um, I have put a lot of emphasis on writing original music and getting it out there. I do a lot of other things, including, I'm a club owner. But for me, at my heart, and what actually matters to me in the end, what makes me the happiest is to try and develop a new sound of some kind. I don't know if I've ever really completely achieved that, but I would like to project, somebody that's searching for a sound that isn't exactly been done before, as best I can. Of course, everybody borrows from everybody, and that's
Yeah,
inevitable. But if when I sit down to write and compose, I'm searching for something that isn't too similar to something that's been done before. And
absolutely.
hopefully people take an interest in that. And if I'm fortunate enough, I'm going on tour on Monday, all over Europe. So we'll see what the reaction is this time.
Yeah, right on. Well, I tell you what, before we get out of the door here, where's the best place for people to pick up the new live album, find out about the club, anything about your world? Where's the best place for people to go?
Well, Origin Records, out of Seattle, is putting out the record. It's also on my Bandcamp page, or will be actually. It's not yet. I have some other CDs available on my Bandcamp. ArthurKell.com is actually going through a revamp as we talk, because my site has been old, but that'll be available. Come to Bar LunÃ in Brooklyn, and my band plays there periodically, or at Smalls, or wherever in New York City. Um, and For the record itself, through my website, there'll be a link, and certainly can be picked up through Origin Records.
Right on. Arthur, thank you so much for taking some time out today. Thanks for your story. Best of luck with everything.
Thanks so much, Joe. A real
A-
pleasure.
Absolutely.